My name is Sarah Brown. I'm 32, and I've been dead to my family for 8 years, until the day I walked into my grandmother's funeral and watched my sister's perfect world crumble with 5 simple words. The chapel was packed, standing room only, which would have made Grandma Rosa proud. She always said she wanted a full house when her time came. I slipped in through the back doors just as the service began, my dress blues hidden beneath a long black coat. I'd flown in from Kandahar 12 hours earlier, still carrying desert dust in my lungs and the weight of command on my shoulders. I spotted them immediately. My family clustered in the front row like a photograph I'd been cropped out of years ago. My sister Alina sat between my parents, her designer dress probably worth more than most people's monthly salary. Her husband, David, the successful investment banker, had his arm around her protectively. My nephew Miguel, now 10, fidgeted beside them in his little suit. 8 years. 8 years since I'd seen any of them. The last time was at Elena's wedding, when I was just a freshly minted second lieutenant trying to prove myself worthy of the Brown name. I remembered the whispered conversations, the sideways glances, the way conversations died when I approached. Poor Sarah, they'd said, still playing soldier. When is she going to grow up and get a real job? Alina had been particularly cruel that night, her voice carrying across the reception hall after one too many glasses of champagne. My sister thinks she's some kind of hero, she'd announced to her new in-law. But really, she's just running away from real life, playing dress-up in the army because she can't handle being a woman in the real world. I'd left the next morning without saying goodbye. Now watching Father Miguel deliver Grandma's eulogy, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, the one that had driven me to excel, to push harder, to prove them wrong in ways they'd never understand. Grandma Rosa had been the only one who believed in me, the only one who saw strength where others saw stubbornness, courage where others saw recklessness. She'd written to me faithfully, even when the rest of the family had given up. Her letters followed me through officer candidate school to my first posting in Georgia, through ranger school to Afghanistan, Iraq, back to Afghanistan. She knew about the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the rapid promotions that had taken me from lieutenant to colonel in record time. She knew about the classified missions, the lives saved, the impossible decisions made in desert compounds and mountain villages. But she'd never told them. Let them see for themselves, Mija. She'd written in her last letter, the one I'd received just 2 weeks ago. When the time is right, they'll understand what you've become. The funeral ended, and I watched my family file out toward the cemetery. I followed at a distance, keeping my coat buttoned tight, my colonel's eagles hidden beneath black wool. At the graveside, I stood behind a cluster of Rosa's neighbors, close enough to hear, but far enough to remain invisible. That's when I heard Elena's voice, cutting through the afternoon air like a blade. I just don't understand why she couldn't even be bothered to come, she was saying to our mother, loud enough for others to hear. I mean, Grandma Rosa loved her so much, and Sarah just abandoned us, abandoned her. My mother nodded sadly. She was always selfish, even as a child. And now, with this whole military fantasy, Alina laughed bitterly. Mom, she's probably a private or something, standing guard at some gate somewhere. Remember what David's friend told us. She's stationed at some nowhere base in Afghanistan. Probably never even saw combat. It's all just an expensive game of pretend. My hands clenched inside my coat pockets. 8 years of leading soldiers into harm's way. 8 years of making life and death decisions. 3 tours in combat zones. A Bronze Star with V device for Valor Under Fire. A Purple Heart from the IED that nearly killed me and my entire platoon outside Fallujah. And to them, I was still just playing dress-up. The cemetery service concluded, and people began moving toward the community center for the reception. I lingered by the grave as the crowd thinned, finally stepping forward when only the grounds remained. Goodbye, Grandma, I whispered, placing a single white rose on the fresh earth. Thank you for believing. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the community center. The reception was in full swing when I arrived. I kept my coat on, moving through the crowd like a ghost, listening to fragments of conversation. Elena held court near the buffet table, surrounded by cousins and family friends, regaling them with stories of her successful husband, her perfect son, her picture-perfect life. Sarah was always the disappointment. I heard her say to Aunt Carmen, Mom and Dad tried so hard with her, but she just couldn't be normal, couldn't find a good man, couldn't settle down. Instead, she runs off to play soldier and breaks Grandma's heart by never visiting. Where is she stationed now? Carmen asked. Alina shrugged. Some base in the middle of nowhere. Afghanistan, I think. Probably sweeping floors or something. You know how the military is. They'll take anyone these days. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly. Something deeper, more final. That's when I saw him. General Morrison stood near the back of the room, still wearing his dress blues, his 3 stars, catching the overhead lights. He was talking quietly with a man I didn't recognize, but his eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for someone, looking for me. I moved toward him, my heart hammering against my ribs. He spotted me halfway across the room, and his weathered face broke into a smile that was both proud and concerned. Colonel Brown, he said quietly when I reached him. I wasn't sure you'd made it. Just arrived, sir, I replied, suddenly aware that my family was only 20 feet away, still completely unaware of my presence. Your grandmother would be proud, he said. I knew Rosa well. She volunteered at the VA hospital for 30 years. She talked about you constantly. I felt tears threaten and pushed them back. Thank you for coming, General. It means Sarah. The voice cut across the room like a gunshot. Alina stood frozen by the buffet table, her plate halfway to her mouth, staring at me with wide eyes. The conversations around us began to die as people turned to look. My parents spotted me next, my mother's hand flying to her chest, my father's face cycling through confusion, shock, and something that might have been shame. Sarah, my mother, rushed toward me, arms outstretched, but I stepped back instinctively. Hello, Mum, I said quietly. Mija, you came. We didn't think Alina said you were deployed. I was. I looked past her to where Alina stood, still frozen, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. I heard what she said at the cemetery. The room had gone completely quiet now, 50 people watching our family drama unfold like a telenola. Alina found her voice first. Sarah, we didn't know you were here. You should have said something. Should I asked, my voice carrying across the silent room. What would you have said? More about how I'm playing soldier, about how I'm just a gate guard somewhere in the desert. Elena's face flushed red. I didn't. Actually. General Morrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in uniform. I think there's been some confusion. He moved to stand beside me, his presence commanding instant attention from everyone in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, he continued, his voice formal and clear. I'd like you to meet Colonel Sarah Brown, commanding officer of the 75th Ranger Regiment's 2nd Battalion. She'd just returned from her 3rd combat deployment, where she led 700 soldiers in some of the most dangerous territory on Earth. The silence stretched like a held breath. Colonel Brown, he continued, turning to face me with military precision, received the Bronze Star with Vice for personally leading a rescue mission that saved 32 Afghan civilians from a Taliban compound. She was wounded in the action and refused medical evacuation until all her soldiers were accounted for. Elena's plate slipped from her hands, shattering against the floor. She's also, General Morrison added, his eyes never leaving mine, the youngest female officer ever to command a Ranger battalion. And as of yesterday, she's been selected for promotion to Brigadier General. The room exploded into whispers and gasps. I saw my father sink into a nearby chair, his face gray with shock. My mother stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing, without sound. But it was Alina I watched. Alina, who had spent 8 years telling everyone who would listen that I was a failure, a disappointment, a woman playing dress-up in a man's world. She stared at me like she was seeing a ghost, or perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time in her life. General Brown, I corrected quietly, looking directly at my sister. As of next month, Alina made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. The room was so quiet, I could hear the coffee maker gurgling in the kitchen. General Morrison nodded respectfully. Rosa Brown never missed a ceremony. Every promotion, every award, every homecoming, she sat in the front row and told anyone who would listen about her granddaughter, the war hero. He paused, his voice softening. She was the proudest woman I've ever met. I felt the tears then, the ones I'd been holding back for 8 years of silence, 8 years of being dismissed and diminished by people who should have known better. She knew, Alina whispered. She knew everything, I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. Every medal, every mission, every soldier I brought home alive. She knew because she cared enough to ask. I looked around the room at the faces staring back at me. Cousins who had written me off, aunts who had whispered about my choices, family, friends who had pied my parents for their troubled daughter. I didn't come here for your apologies, I said clearly. I came to honor the woman who believed in me when no one else would. The woman who saw strength where you saw stubbornness, courage where you saw failure. I turned to Alina, who was crying, now mascara streaming down her cheeks. You want to know why I never came home? I asked quietly. Because I was busy becoming someone worthy of Grandma Rosa's love. Someone she could be proud of. Someone who could protect this country and the freedom that lets you stand in this room and judge. People you don't understand. Alina opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not the same person who left 8 years ago, I continued. I've held dying soldiers in my arms. I've made decisions that saved lives, and decisions that haunted me. I've earned the respect of some of the finest people this country has ever produced. And I did it all while you were here, telling everyone who would listen that I was a disappointment. I unbuttoned my coat and let it fall to the floor, revealing my dress blue uniform with its rows of ribbons, my colonel's eagles gleaming on my shoulders. The room was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. Grandma Rosa wasn't ashamed of me, I said finally. She was proud, prouder than you'll ever understand. I turned to General Morrison, who was watching me with something that looked like paternal pride. Thank you for coming, sir. It would have meant everything to her. He nodded. The memorial service is tomorrow at Arlington. Full honors. She earned it. Arlington, my mother whispered. Rosa Brown volunteered at the VA hospital for 30 years. General Morrison explained. She's being buried in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors by special request of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I saw Elena's legs give out. David caught her before she hit the floor. Sarah, my father said, his voice broken. We didn't know. We never knew. I looked at him, this man who had raised me, who had once been my hero, who had let his disappointment in my choices poison 8 years of our relationship. You never asked, I said simply. I picked up my coat and walked toward the door, General Morrison falling in to step beside me. Colonel Alina called out, her voice desperate. Sarah, please. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I stopped at the door and turned back one last time. Tomorrow, I said quietly, when they play taps for Grandma Rosa at Arlington, when they fold that flag and hand it to me as her next of kin, when you see 700 Rangers in dress blues standing at attention in her honor, maybe then you'll understand what you spent 8 years mocking. I walked out into the afternoon sun, leaving behind 8 years of silence and a room full of people who finally understood exactly who I had become. Outside, General Morrison placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Your grandmother would be proud, he said quietly. I nodded, finally allowing myself to smile. Yes, sir. She would be. As we walked toward his staff car, I heard the door open behind us. Elena's voice carried across the parking lot, broken and desperate. Sarah, please don't go. But I kept walking. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Some words, once spoken, can never be taken back. I had a funeral to plan, and a grandmother to honor. The woman who had believed in me when no one else would. The woman who had seen the soldier in me before I even knew she existed. The rest of them would have to live with the knowledge of who I really was, and who they had chosen not to.